The song was halfway through when she leaned in. I felt her hand shift against my shoulder, the small, deliberate adjustment of someone who has made a decision and is making room to say it. And then her voice was close, low enough that nobody around us on that floor could catch it. And she said, "I heard them dare you from across the room. I want you to know, I would have said yes 5 minutes ago." She pulled back. She looked at me the way someone looks when they have chosen the honest thing and are waiting to see what you do with it. I was standing on a Friday night dance floor in a bar I did not particularly like, holding a woman I had known for 11 days, and something in my chest moved in a way I could not categorize as coincidence. This is how we got there. My name is Eli Warner. I'm 33. I work as a freight operations coordinator for a mid-sized distribution company, which means I manage routing, schedules, and the daily probability that something unexpected will need a decision before noon. I live in a one-bedroom apartment I have been meaning to improve for the better part of 2 years. The light is good. The kitchen is functional rather than aspirational. I cook on Sundays and eat it through Thursday, which is the kind of domestic system that works perfectly until someone points out that it is slightly grim. I am not, in most measurable ways, an interesting person. I run on Saturday mornings. I have 4 people I would call close friends, and I see them infrequently, and this does not bother me. I am the kind of man who keeps to himself and has made a reasonable peace with what that costs. Nora Calloway joined the company 11 days before the night of the dare as our new compliance and records officer. I knew this because I had been paying attention to her since day 2, which I would not have admitted if asked directly. She was quiet in the way that is different from shyness. The particular quiet of someone who has learned to take the full measure of a room before they choose to occupy it. She had dark eyes and the specific composed expression of a person whose thoughts were moving faster than their face was letting on. She kept a small black notebook in the breast pocket of her jacket. I had seen her take it out 3 times in 11 days, once in a meeting on her second morning, once in the corridor outside the break room, once at the end of a long Wednesday afternoon when she was standing at the lobby window with the pen moving quickly, like she was recording something before it got away. I had no idea what she was recording. That bothered me in a way I did not find proportionate. We met properly on her 3rd day. She came into the kitchen while I was making coffee and asked, without ceremony, where the decent mugs were kept. I showed her. She made her coffee incorrectly, barely enough milk, not nearly enough time, and she clearly knew this and clearly had no interest in correcting it, which I found quietly specific. She said thank you. She left. 11 days. That was all we had managed. Then, Marcus made a suggestion. The company's quarterly Friday nights happened at the same bar every time. A place that was fine in the way that places are when nobody has strongly objected to them. 12, 15 people, depending on the quarter, the usual reliable pattern of who drank too fast and got reflective, who nursed one thing for 3 hours and had 4 good conversations, who orbited the dance floor making promises in the direction of later. That Friday, Nora was at a table near the far wall. She had come, which I had not predicted. 11 days in, she barely knew anyone, but there she was, with a glass of white wine and the contained, unhurried self-possession of someone who had decided to show up and had given herself exactly 1 hour. She had the notebook on the table in front of her. She wasn't writing in it. She was leaving it there the way people leave something familiar within reach when the room around them is still becoming known. I had been watching her in the careful, sidelong way of a man being very deliberate about not watching her for the better part of 40 minutes. Then, Marcus leaned over. Marcus from the logistics team. 41, The man with the easy social confidence of someone who has never seriously questioned whether an idea is a good one before saying it aloud. He grinned and said, "Go ask the new girl to dance." The table received this the way tables receive harmless suggestions on Friday nights. A low, good-natured noise, the kind of collective warmth that has more to do with the hour than the idea. It wasn't unkind. It was thoughtless in the way of a group of people who are comfortable and have briefly forgotten that not everyone in the room is. "She's been sitting there all night," Marcus said. Reasonably, someone should. He was not wrong. I have coordinated freight routes under pressure for 8 years. I have managed situations that went wrong in 4 directions at once before 11 in the morning. Poor decisions made quickly are my professional habitat, and I have come out the other side of most of them. I stood up. The table made the sound tables make when something has committed to itself. I did not look back for commentary. I picked up my drink and I crossed the room. 40 feet of bar. I covered it like a man who has decided on a course of action and is not going to examine the reasoning until it is too late to reconsider. A perfectly reasonable strategy, as far as strategies go. She saw me coming from about 20 feet out. I know because I watched her look up from the table, track me steadily across the room, and set her wine glass down with both hands. A careful, unhurried movement that suggested she was recalibrating something. When I reached her, I said the simplest version. "Would you like to dance?" She looked at me for 1 full second. Then she said, "Okay." Not yes, okay. The word of someone for whom this is not a surprise and who has no interest in overstating it. She left the notebook on the table. I noticed that. I was noticing things at a speed I could not fully keep up with. I kept moving. I should be direct about something. I am not a good dancer. I am a person who can approximate the tempo of music and has enough self-awareness to keep his arms at a reasonable position. This is the complete scope of my ability in this area. I had made my peace with it before we reached the floor, and she made no comment at any point, which was either gracious or she had simply decided it was not worth mentioning. She moved with the ease of someone comfortable in their own body, not performance, not showing off. Just the particular groundedness of a person who has been in their own body long enough to trust it. She didn't fill the space with noise. She didn't perform enjoyment. She was just there, present, holding my hand with a matter-of-fact grip, looking at me with the same direct expression she used for most things, and I had the specific sensation of being looked at clearly, without the lens of what I was supposed to be or what impression I was supposed to make. The first song ended, and the second one started, and she didn't signal any inclination to stop, which I filed under. Good, and tried not to examine further. She was interesting. She had been interesting on day 2, in the meeting, and she was interesting now. 2 feet away from me on a crowded Friday night floor, and I had spent 11 days telling myself that interesting was a category and not a direction, and I was becoming increasingly aware that this had been an argument I'd been making to myself for my own benefit. I have the survival instincts of a man who has been carefully not deciding something for a week and a half. Let me tell you about the meeting. It was her second morning. Revised supplier protocol, a topic that had been on the agenda for 6 weeks and had been losing the room incrementally since the 12-minute mark. 43 minutes in, 4 people were visibly on their phones. The slide on the screen had been the same one for 11 minutes, and the meeting was dying the quiet death of meetings that stopped being productive before they technically ended. She put her hand up. She asked a question. Not the obvious question. Not the question you ask when you want to be seen asking. The question nobody else had thought of, which reframed the central problem in a way that made the previous 43 minutes feel like they had been spent looking at the wrong wall. She asked it without raising her voice, without looking around to check the room's reaction, and then she took the notebook from her jacket pocket and wrote the answer down. I sat across the table and thought, who is this person? Then I went back to my desk and told myself that noticing someone's competence in a meeting was not something that required further action. There was the elevator, 2 days later. She'd come on at the lobby with a stack of binders under one arm and the notebook in her hand, and she'd been reading something on her phone. Actually reading, not scrolling. The focused stillness of genuine attention. And when the doors opened at my floor, she looked up and said sorry, with the automatic reflex of someone who assumes they've caused an inconvenience. She had no reason to apologize. I had been in the elevator for 35 seconds. But she said it. And then she tucked the phone away and shifted the binders. And the doors closed, and I stood in the corridor for a moment, in the specific, slightly irritating way of a person who has just been given a detail they didn't ask for that they are not going to be able to set aside. The detail was, she apologizes by instinct, for things that aren't her fault, to people she barely knows. That's a kind of person. I recognized the kind. And then there was the break room on her 6th day. Late in the afternoon, when the building had gone quiet, she was standing at the window with the notebook open, writing quickly, and I came in for water and she did not look up. And we were in the same room, in the same silence, for what I later estimated was approximately 4 minutes. It was the easy silence of two people who are not performing for each other, which is rarer than it should be, especially with someone you've known for less than a week. Then she said, without looking up, "Do you know if there's a decent lunch place near here? Not the sandwich one. Something that—" She stopped, made a gesture with the pen that communicated what she meant without finishing the sentence. I told her about the place on Crane Street. She wrote it down. She said thank you. I left. I thought about that 4 minutes for longer than was warranted on the drive home. I thought about the way the pen moved and the way she'd communicated an entire preference with a half-finished sentence and a gesture, and how it had been perfectly clear to me. I thought about how that is a specific thing between specific people, and how I was going to file it under nothing, which I did. The filing cabinet was getting full. The second song gave way to a third, and the floor filled up more around us, which meant the reasonable geography of the dance changed slightly. Not dramatically, the kind of incremental shift that happens when a room has more people than space, where proximity is practical rather than chosen. Her hand had settled more firmly on my arm. She was looking somewhere past my shoulder at the middle distance, the look of someone whose thoughts have pulled a step ahead of the room. I said something low about the song, something I don't fully remember. She looked at me and smiled, the real one, the one that happened without the slight moderating quality she applied to most of her expressions, the one that looked like something she hadn't quite decided to offer, and offered anyway, and for a moment neither of us said anything. The room was still the room. The music was still the music. But something in the space between us had stopped being incidental. She was looking at me. I was looking at her. The noise around us did the thing noise does when you stop processing it. Then I felt her hand shift on my shoulder. The small, deliberate adjustment. Making room. She leaned in. I heard them dare you from across the room. I want you to know, I would have said yes 5 minutes ago. She pulled back. She looked at me with the clear, direct expression she had for the things she had decided to tell the truth about. The song was still playing. Around us, people moved and talked. The bar was still the bar. I looked at her and thought about 11 days of a filing system that had been, apparently, entirely unnecessary. And something in my face must have communicated some version of that, because her expression shifted, just slightly. just enough, into something that was not quite uncertainty, but was close enough to it that I recognized it. The song ended. We stepped off the floor. She picked up the notebook from the table without sitting down and held it against her arm in the particular way she had of keeping it close. And she looked at me with the composed directness she brought to most things, and she said, "You don't have to do anything with that." "I know. We work at the same company." She glanced at the notebook briefly. "I'll take it back if you need me to. I'm very good at pretending I didn't say things." I looked at her. She was looking at me the way she had on the floor, like she had already told the truth and was not going to add a condition to it, but was leaving the decision to me. "Nora," I said, "I want you to say it again, without the music." Something shifted behind the composure. Brief. Unguarded. What you said. I want to hear it in a room that's not moving." She was quiet for one moment. Her thumb moved to the cover of the notebook, a small automatic check, like confirming something was still where she'd left it. Then she said, "I've been watching you across this room for 40 minutes. When Marcus stood up and said your name, I thought." She stopped. Started again. "I was going to leave in 20 minutes. I had my jacket. I was going to go home, and that was going to be the night." She looked at me steadily. "And then you stood up." She said it quietly, too clearly, like the sentence had been in her chest all evening, taking up space, and she was relieved to put it somewhere. Something in me that had been held at a particular angle for 11 days shifted into a different position. "I can give you the exit," I said. "I mean it. We go back inside. Next week is exactly the same. You have my word." She looked at me. She didn't move. "I've been in this city for 3 months," she said. "I know 6 people. 5 of them are at this company." A pause. "Every morning for 11 days, you're the person I looked for first." I didn't know what to do with that. "Then your name came up and you stood up and I thought..." She stopped. I thought, okay, there it is. That landed. I took 1 step toward her. Measured, deliberate, giving her every opening to step back if she needed it. She didn't step back. I reached out and slipped the notebook carefully into her breast pocket, the same pocket she always kept it in, the place she always reached for it. She watched my hand. I kept it there for a moment, at the lapel, and she looked up, and the careful composure she carried everywhere had gone honest in the way it goes when someone has stopped managing the distance between themselves and a thing. "Day 2, I said. "The meeting." The question nobody else asked. "I went back to my desk and I thought about you for an hour, and I told myself it didn't mean anything." I looked at her. "I've been telling myself that for 11 days. I've been very committed to it." She held my gaze. "Logistics," she said. Then, quietly, the real smile. "That's what I was writing. In the notebook. What I kept noticing." I was about to say something. Then, Marcus came around the corner from the back corridor at speed, with his jacket half buttoned, and the focused expression of a man who has been sent to find people and finds this a completely reasonable task. "There you are, mate. Everyone's been looking." He stopped. He looked at me. He looked at Nora. He looked at the 3 inches between us and the hand I still had at her lapel, and the expression on her face, which was not a complicated expression to read. His brain worked through the information. "Right," he said. "No, I've seen absolutely nothing. I was never in this corridor. This never happened." He turned around. He walked away. He was gone. Nora pressed her mouth shut. Then she gave up and laughed, properly, unmoderated, the version she hadn't been giving anyone all night, and I leaned against the wall and watched it happen, And when she looked at me again, there was something in her face that had not been there 11 days ago, or had been there and simply had not yet been offered to anyone. I decided then that I was going to spend as much time as possible being the person it was offered to. 6 weeks later, she ordered her coffee with the right amount of time and the right amount of milk, and looked at me across the kitchen as if she expected a reaction. "That's correct," I said. "Don't make a thing of it," she said. I made nothing of it and thought about it for the rest of the day. 8 months after that, the notebook was on my bookshelf. She hadn't mentioned putting it there. It had appeared one weekend between a project manual I used constantly and a reference binder I hadn't opened since spring, and it sat there with the settled authority of something that had always belonged in that spot. She didn't reference it. I didn't reference it. We had both spent long enough communicating in the indirect version of things that we were now, slowly and deliberately, learning we didn't have to. The notebook was the direct version, so I left it where it was. Years later, when people asked how we met, I told them about the dare. It was the easy version, a clear shape, a good ending, something people could follow and smile at. Marcus dared me. I walked across the room. She said something I wasn't ready for. Nora would listen to me tell it. She always waited until I got to the end. Then she would say, "He was watching me from across that bar for 40 minutes before they dared him. He just didn't know that I could see him doing it." She said it the way she said most things, straight, without ornament, with the particular warmth of someone who is no longer pretending. She had said yes before I asked. She had said yes before Marcus said my name. She had been saying it, quietly, in a filing system of her own, for 11 days. I just didn't know that part yet.